Hello, friends, and welcome in. It is Rates and Barrels. I'm your host today, Chris Welsh. No DVR, but he's coming back soon, sometime into the near future. Until then, you'll have to deal with me just a little bit extra. Joined as always by my great friend Eno Saris. You guys can check out the 2023 Fantasy Baseball Draft Kit at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. If you're not already a subscriber, $2 a month for the first year gets you in the door. You can check out all the fantastic stuff with the Draft Kit plus pitching plus projections by Eno. My dynasty ranks are up there. It's a whole bunch of great stuff. So go and sign up today. There's no reason not to. Eno, today we're going to do some news. It's been a little bit since we've caught up, and a little bit of spring training going on. Quite a bit of things, from performances to stuff changes to injuries and more. It's a lot of baseball right now, and it is a glorious time, my friend.
Oh my God, did so much baseball. The kids started Little League. And so I was coached by, we just had Lars Nootbaar on last week. I was coached by Lars Nootbaar's dad in how to coach my kid in pitching. So that was a fun little clinic. Charlie Nootbaar came by for the National Pitching Association. He's associated with Tom House. And, they gave us some exercises the kids can do. And one of the biggest things that I thought was really interesting was you should warm up to throw. You should not throw to warm up. And that is very different from what we'd heard in the past in coaching. You know, if you're doing a practice for little kids, almost always you say, go grab a ball, get out there and start tossing the ball around. That's how you start practice. And he was saying that doesn't make sense. You should be warm. And he's got these, like, you're running around with your arms up in the air and you're flapping them around and you're doing all sorts of stuff. But the idea is to basically activate all your muscles before you start playing.
So like stretch and I bet little kids just love running around waving their hands. My kid would love that. So instead of picking up the ball and throwing it, just kind of get moving the shoulders and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Like even one where you just run with your hands up in the air like this, or one where you run with your hands going like this, and one where you run, you're like twisting while you're running. All this stuff is to like activate your obliques, activate your shoulders. The kids have pretty weak rotator cuffs and shoulders, so you want to get those warmed up. You don't want to just pick up a ball and fling it and be like, ow, So I thought that was pretty useful. I thought that was pretty interesting. And so we're going to try and incorporate. I think the easiest, it's funny when you do one of these and you're like, man, this is so different than what we've been doing in practice, like this is like, that's overwhelming. How are we going to, and I'm like, you know what? Bite off what you can chew. Make it real easy. Let's do this. Everyone take a lap before you throw. Let's just start with that, and then if we get more organized, we can do, laps with the arms in the air, or finish the lap with your arms up in the air like this. All right, boom. That's better than we were yesterday.
That's actually really cool to know. My kid is 10 years old. He wants to really start getting into baseball, and he's a lefty. He's actually ambidextrous. He can do things with both hands. So I've always kind of told him, he doesn't understand the concept of it, but I'm like, hey buddy, like you're going to do mighty fine if we can get you rolling. Switch hitting, big lefty, whatever it is.
I can't do it at all. Like I cannot figure it. I can't
Useless.
think. Like, even when I'm like talking to a left-handed pitcher, I have to be like, listen, I'm going to show you something, but I have to do it with my right hand because I can't even think. Like, I can't even make the right motion with my left side.
The only thing that's actually helped me is having a son who's a lefty. I've had to start doing some things in that motion to show him because he has a hard time conceptualizing when I do things righty, but he just started to want to get into baseball, and I'll start diving down there. So there's a good tip. And probably the coolest thing ever that can bring in, like the Nootbaar family and like another amazing people. Everyone's gonna have expectations of you, though. They're gonna be like, all right, so when are you gonna bring in Sean Manaea to show us how to do this? And when are you gonna bring in this next player? When are you gonna bring in Joey Votto to talk to the kids about hitting? That's gonna be the expectation of you.
Yeah, I don't. I try to keep expectations low. I mean, it's just hard because it actually becomes so much baseball when I'm watching spring training and taking at a practice with one kid, and I take the other kid to his other practice, and they're talking about baseball, and we're watching it on TV, and I'm writing about it. It's like, woo! When we were doing it in fall ball, I was like, this is a lot. and
It is.
I can't believe my wife is cool with this.
I had a similar thing. I spent a Thursday. We're going to talk about it next week in an episode, but my days have just been at camps the whole time. I've been getting different videos and stuff I've been trying to share. And my day started off out of camp, coming home, recording, and then going out. I was invited to the Top Spot House, and Nando actually got me hooked up with it. And I got to go out there and see there were a bunch of players, interviews were going on. Randy Johnson was out there doing photography for Tops. And I was actually able to interview Drew Jones with Arizona Diamondbacks. And I'm going to play some audio of it next week on an episode where we're going to be talking, I think, about first-year player next week. So you can be on the lookout for that. But those days where your entire day is consumed with baseball, sometimes your head spins a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Like, well, I'm all in.
Yeah,
it's funny to then like contrast that with, and I hate to whine about work, but to contrast that with like people yelling at you on Twitter that you don't love baseball because you think the pitch clock is fine. It's just, and I like my hackles raised and I want to argue it, but there's no arguing with this.
There's no arguing. There's no arguing. We're actually going to talk about that. So
like, I can't hear you. I'm trying to listen to Charlie Newtmeyer help me coach my kid. I just got off
talking with Lars. Yeah,
exactly. I must hate it.
I hate baseball, but I just talked to Lars Newtbar. I got Charlie Newtbar here, and we're going to be talking to other amazing players here soon, and doing it 5 days a week.
98% of my days are involved in baseball.
Well, people listening, it might not be 98% of their day or anything like that, but there's been a lot of stuff that has gone on, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I think it was a really good decision. And I were talking about this, and we just play catch up on a lot of the big things, more so than anything else. With spring training like officially starting only a couple days ago, we are really getting to see some of the big practices that are lining up here, and there are some big changes. So we're going to talk about the biggest pieces of news down to even some of the really interesting performance-based things. So that's what we're going to do on the episode today. And the biggest thing that came down was actually over on the Padres. I was going to that camp the day that Manny Machado, which was reported by Jeff Passan, Manny Machado did re-sign with the San Diego Padres on an 11-year, $350 million deal, which did not feel like it was going to happen. I was going to Padres camp that day. I walked in there, and there were maybe 150 to 200 people lined up, raring to go. And I was like, today's not the day we're going to do the Padres, because it was just chaotic there. But it really seemed like, and a lot of people everywhere assumed Manny Machado was gone, and people were lining him up with the Mets, that he was going to get big money. I was also there the day he did the interview in the like wild outfit where he's like, I'm opting out, and we're not doing anything. And it really seemed like it was in a bad spot. But they turned it around.
People even thought that the Xander Bogaerts signing might have been like, in anticipation of losing Machado. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not. And well, there's a couple things with it, but somehow they've got endless amounts of money. And I don't know how they're doing it. You've got the Juan Soto situation that's out there, but they just signed Yu Darvish. They got Xander Bogaerts. They got Tatis. They've got a crew of players that are going to be playing until their 40s, and hopefully these guys will get going. So what are your thoughts on them even being able to secure this, and Manny Machado ending his career with the San Diego Padres? Do you like these guys signing these deals like that are into their 40s pretty much for the Padres? Do you think this is a good idea for the Padres?
Yeah, I mean, their estimated 2023 payroll is now $262 million, and for 2024 without arbitration, it's $169. But then you've got Soto there in arbitration, Jake Cronenworth in his second year, Grisham in his second year. So I would assume that you add another sort of $40 or $50 million in arbitration, guys. So that gets you over 200, while also losing Luis Garcia, Adam Engel, Nelson Cruz, Blake Snell to free agency, and Josh Hader to free agency. So they're going to be at, just about 10 million short of the luxury tax threshold, and need a closer and another starting pitcher.
Well, was it also mentioned, by the way, that they are still planning to be at the forefront of the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes next season? Or
that does seem crazy to me. I mean, part of it maybe is putting the lie to the fact that maybe other teams could be doing this too. That teams could be spending more on payroll than they do. It's also fascinating in light of the fact that Bally's and a bunch of these TV contracts are Bally's about to go belly up, and there's a couple other AT&T and Apple. I think there's a couple that want to get out of their contracts. So there's a lot of TV money that's going to be exiting the industry pretty soon. I do think long term teams will find a way to market directly their video directly to fans. So then it could be the end of blackouts, and also maybe a better arrangement financially for teams where they can be like, we can make as much money as we can make off of our direct subscribers. We can directly have a product that we sell to our subscribers, our video, right?
Well, like a Padres, like Padres online, Padres TV online, or something like that, where people
like an MLB
app, or
an MLB TV, but I'm just a Padres. I just buy for the Padres.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're headed. And that might mean more money for teams. Then you put it into context with the fact that the Padres have come out of small market status and are not a luxury tax receiver anymore. So there's been a change in kind of their market status as it's defined by baseball.
I can put it on the backfields here. There is no team, and I haven't gone to all of them, of course, and the Dodgers are their own animal. But there is no team I've been to that has bigger crowds than the Padres, and that rivals the Dodgers. And if you've ever been to spring training out here and you go to the backfield, the Dodgers is a zoo. It's an absolute zoo of people. Mm-hmm. That's the Padres now. People are lining up in droves to go down there, new fans that are out there. But I will tell you this, if the Padres start up a Patreon, I'm out on baseball. I'm out. If they start their own Patreon, and that's going to be the direct-to-consumer stuff. They're like, hey, we got a Patreon. Come on, check it out. I'm out on all of that. But it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that stretching out these deals has a little bit of a manipulating the luxury tax element to it, where it's like, okay, we would love to pay him $40 million for 8 years or whatever, or whatever, like a shorter term. But if we spread it out to 10 and 11 years, we make the average annual value lower, and that would leave us under the luxury tax. I'd love to say that's what's going on in San Diego, but that can't be what's going on in San Diego if they're going to be at the luxury tax next year, just with their core. It's not meant to stay under the luxury tax. This is just spending, this is just spending to get better and to take on the Dodgers. So
do you think at all, when you look at this, that there's a lot of weirdness going around with Fernando Tatis? Do you think the signing of Manny Machado is a precursor to, like, something's got to break with this team? And it's not Darvish, it's not Xander Bogaerts, it's now not Manny Machado. It feels like it's going to come down to Tatis or Soto. Do you think with maybe a little bit of a fractured relationship, Tatis might be on the way out?
In the past, a deal like this was unmovable. You're talking about these long, big deals. Like, remember how hard it was for the Marlins to trade away Giancarlo Stanton?
Yeah.
In the middle of his long deal? Like, they basically had to just take whatever the Yankees would give them. Like, they weren't getting prospects. It was just like, here, take the contract.
The Diamondbacks, Zach Greinke's contract cost the Diamondbacks Paul Goldschmidt. Because of the deal that they had put on Greinke, they were unable to afford Paul Goldschmidt and had to do that awful trade that they did. And I mean, we even saw the Diamondbacks at one point get under a bat, and I just know about the Diamondbacks. They had to trade one of their top prospects with Bronson Arroyo to the Braves just to get rid of him, and they didn't even get anything back. They're just like, here, we'll give you a prospect and give you this contract. And
so if you're the Padres, you're not attaching a prospect to Tatis to trade him away. So I figure basically it's Soto. I think they don't sign Soto to a long-term deal. It's just that he's a Boras guy. He's not necessarily going to go out there and give them an extension, right? He wants to hit the open market, and that's at least what he said. So,
and we'll see if that actually happens.
Right. But I kind of, I didn't think there would be 3 $30 million guys on one team, but I kind of doubt there's going to be 4 $30 million guys on one team.
Pretty shocking.
And I think Soto, maybe they hold on to Soto as the guy that they can trade in season if they're having a bad year. But if they are having a bad year after all this and don't make the playoffs, like, what point does the love affair between Seidler and Preller run out?
Pretty soon. I think it can be cured by the acquisition of Shohei Ohtani. If you continuously create excitement around the team, it's smoke and mirrors sometimes. You're like, hey,
just
don't
get
look
more
over
guys.
here. Watch my hand here. Don't look at my hand over here. That might be, unfortunately, what they become.
What happens if they lose in the first round? I'm fascinated by the Padres. It's just if they lose in the first round, is that enough momentum to say, okay, we're still building something good here? I'll give you another $500 million for Shohei Ohtani.
I think it's a possibility. It also could be a possibility that they break something up, and that breakup might be a Tatis. I know those rumors have been flying. Not to be past if you have any other comments on it, obviously, but the Padres were also in the other big piece of news. There's two other things we're going to talk about here that we are finally seeing all of what is going to be the pitch clock. And it's 15 seconds, no man on base, 20 seconds with a man on base. We had the first two violations, and Manny Machado, who we're actually talking about, was the very first recipient of a called strike. And I believe Robbie Ray was the very first recipient of a delay, which was a ball. We also saw a game end in a walk-off style where Cal Conley stepped out and was called strike, and the game just ended, which is wild. And like you said, the internet is going crazy about it. I've experienced this quite a bit. I'm very indifferent, and I'm probably, if you hate it, it's not going to be good for me, because, or you're not going to like me, because it's worked. I've seen it work. It speeds up games. I like it, but it definitely I feel anxiety watching. I feel like pitchers in spring training are going really fast, and it's screwing with stuff. So talk to me about what you've seen with the pitch clock and the adjustments for hitters and pitchers so far in spring training.
I think there'll be an adjustment for people watching. I think that baseball for a lot of people is something you put on, you do other things. I mean, I honestly think
that because it's like a podcast.
Yeah, or like, I mean, maybe it's just my life. Baseball is always on in my house, but when you have baseball always on and it's a slow paced game, you'll wash the dishes and look up, oh, someone hit a homer. You know what I mean? Like that's like, that can be a sort of average game watching experience as I'm watching it while I'm cooking dinner, right? But I think the pitch clock baseball is more like, no, you got to watch this. Instead of like 4 hours of baseball is on while I'm doing things, this is going to be 2.5 hours of watch it, of like actually watch it. And
baseball used to be a comedy, and now it's more like a really intense drama where it's like,
you got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. And so I think that'll be an adjustment for some people. Some people, I think, are right to react to that, and that's totally fine for them if they're really angry about that. I'm surprised to see people think that they would just never watch baseball again because of the pitch clock. I've seen there was a yes/no. See, when we asked people what are the biggest issues in the game, pitch clock was number 5, or just pacing was number 5.
I agree with that.
And 48% people said that. So then there was all these people online being like, oh, 52% said it wasn't a big deal. I was like, that's not actually how the poll worked. The poll asked, is this one of the biggest issues in the game? So the other 52%, you don't know if they thought it was a little issue, it wasn't an issue. You know what I mean? Like they just didn't put it on the list. In fact, you should look at the ranked list and see, oh, they thought it was the 5th most important thing in the game. And if you look at all the stuff above it, it's not stuff that baseball can do anything about unilaterally. It's all stuff like, spending is out of spending is out of control, or tanking. Tanking is on there. Well, they tried to do something about tanking in the CBA. It's very complicated to do anything about tanking. It requires getting the owners and players and Major League Baseball on the same page. That's very difficult, but pace of play is something they can actually do something about. So they're trying to do something about it. It is something that people care about. Travis Sawchik had a yes/no poll that was like, do you like it or not? It was 80% last time I checked. There was like 2,000 votes, and it was 80% people liked it. Yeah. So I think that people are just going to like it. I think that the early part, it was always going to suck, because there's just going to be people who have to get used to it. And I think from watching, I haven't seen hard numbers on this yet, but from watching, it looks to me like the hitters are having a harder time than the pitchers.
Well, there's a lot of adjustments in, them getting back to the plate and getting rolling. Pitchers don't have a lot of.
You have to be alert. The batter has to be alert to the pitcher in 8 seconds. And there's plenty of guys who will get their feet in and be like swinging their bat, but not looking at the pitcher. That's been the basic of what's happened.
Well, also people need to understand, it's not it's
breaking news.
What do we got?
Gavin Lux limping, cannot put pressure on his right foot. They're taking him off in a cart.
Ooh, on a cart?
His right knee, he couldn't put pressure on it, and they're taking him off, and he looks bad.
Oh no.
That's too bad because we just had the news of him adding 6 miles an hour bat speed at Driveline.
And the uptick in speed, stolen base attempts that Dave Roberts wanted him and Miguel Vargas to start doing.
Oh!
You're freaking me out. What's happening?
It's just a really awkward. It's basically one of those like high ankle sprains that he's feeling all the way up to the knee, I think.
Oh, can we not? We can't. Is it one that's not good to watch?
It was like I was like, ow, like
Oh
you
no,
know,
I
that
can't do
definitely
those.
hurts. It's not like is it Naismith or whatever, or like the leg is like going in different directions. It's not
I
that.
can't
It's
do
not
that.
that bad, but it looks bad. I would guess like, you know, out like 3 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So
Chris Taylor, that would be Chris Taylor, who looks like he would probably fill in for that spot. If Miguel Vargas was a short,
it does mean against Vargas is probably on the team. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's even more of a guarantee. It just, my brain got going thinking, man, what if Miguel Vargas is shortstop and they put Mookie out at second base because they got guys like Trace, you know, they got like Trace Thompson.
I don't think Vargas is that good defensively.
No, he's not. They wouldn't do that. But that would probably something where
I think Chris Taylor's already done with shortstop too. So I think it just means more Miguel Rojas.
Miguel Rojas just, I think he left the game yesterday or today. He just came up limp and had something going on as well. So
could this be a bad year for the Dodgers, dude?
Well, we're talking about the Padres. This is a good thing for the Padres and their fans if that were to happen. So you freaked me out. You freaked me out with the injury.
They just did the slow. They just did the slow mo, and I was like, yeah. But we were talking about the clocks. I think that people will get used to the clocks. I don't think that it'll be a major problem for anybody. I am surprised that Kenley Jansen found out he's the slowest pitcher in baseball by watching MLB Network in the clubhouse. And I've been watching some of the Sox games. They've had a ton of violations in the Sox games. I kind of feel like the Sox didn't really prepare for this.
Well, see, okay, that's where I was going to go.
Called Kenley Jansen and said, "Hey, by the way, in your off-season throwing progressions, could you just have some clock on that?"
You see, it's interesting you say that, because what I was going to say was that people should also understand. I guess I can't speak to every single team, but you should understand that, like, it's not like the guys stepped up to their first game on Friday, Saturday, and we're like, all right, let's figure out this clock thing.
Well, I think it seems like that for Boston.
Maybe for Boston it was. That's probably not a big shock at this point. But we didn't. I reported. I showed a video during camp the previous week about Eovaldi, that they were working. The Rangers were on the clocks on the fields, and they were also working with PitchCom. And then you saw. And you saw the adjustments as well. Like Max Scherzer, I think, pitched today or yesterday, and he had like the PitchCom device on his glove, and he was just calling pitches.
Zach Greinke's calling from his belt.
A lot of these guys are. This is going to be the time period,
and they're the older guys that might be slower, and the younger guys that you don't necessarily want calling their own games are just more used to the PitchCom, like more used to the pitch clock. They're more used to it. So
pacing,
like,
they're used
anybody
to
like quicker. This is what I think is funny is like there's people being like, "Oh, it's terrible," and I was like, this is the first time you've seen it. You haven't watched any college baseball or minor league baseball in the last 5 years. I guess not.
Yeah.
But it's been out there. It's been coming for a long time. And you could have checked it out. But I think it's like a it's a shock of a new rule. That's a big deal. And I don't want to take that away from anybody. I don't want to take it away from anybody if they hate it. That's fine.
The only question I have with this for you, we can go to the next big piece, and then the second half of this episode is going to really be about a lot of the news and spring training and stuff. And I know it's probably dicey because it's only been a couple days and you're not like at spring training. Have you heard from any players or any connections or anything that have made comments about this process yet? Is there anything getting out there? I know you have some good relationship with some guys, but is anybody complaining or just being like, this isn't a big deal? It's only been 5 days.
Well, Lars Nootbaar interview did say that it would be harder maybe on the hitters than the pitchers, and he was talking about it's going to be interesting for the hitters, and I think that's been proven to be true. We've seen Trevor May tweet about the Boston thing. He said, just like I dreamed about on the Sandlot or whatever. So I think people really didn't like the game ending, and maybe there will be a tweak where they say it's off in the 9th inning. I mean, why not? Just turn it off in the 9th inning. I don't know.
Well, it's not going to end like that, by the way, in season. We're not going to Well, no, I guess they will. Yeah,
It
I
could,
don't
it
know.
could, but it's
Yeah, you're right.
it's a very niche case, and it's also in the first week of doing it. So, one thing that I was tweeting out was that in the beginning, when they did these things in the minor leagues, there was 2 infractions a game, and then 5 weeks in with their new rules, there was an infraction every 2 games. So that's on the same level of delay of game penalties in football, which seems like a very similar thing. Delay of game's been around for a while. They still mess it up. So there's some expected number of just mess ups that just happening.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can get it. And I think once it comes once every 2 games and the penalty is just a ball or a strike, I think we'll get over it. I doubt we're going to get one of those game ending situations again for a long time.
And that's how minor leagues and like AFL, that's how it became. It became really a non-thing, and it will over time. It's just very much in our face. The other big thing that has been looming around that we're finally getting a little bit of data on, for better, for worse, or whatever you can take it as, are the stolen base numbers. And our friend Jason Collette, our mutual friend Jason Collette, had a really interesting tweet, and he cited you on it. The tweet that you can check out, follow him at Jason Collette, was 2022 spring training steal attempts per game were 0.77. This year, in 2023, they are 1.7. He cited you saying, Eno has mentioned teams run more in spring than regular season.
Is it 1.07 or 1.7?
1.07. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is
1.07.
1.07.
Yeah.
And he said that you had mentioned that teams run more in spring than regular season. League attempts per rate last year were 0.68. So 0.78 was the spring training, and then 0.68 was in season. He ends up breaking it down where you can see the differential, which is on average about, and we're just going to do an average here, of about a 20% decrease from spring training to in season. But you're looking at a 0.09, which actually was what he put on his bar. So 0.07, 0.09, whatever it is, which would be the highest since 2012 of spring training numbers. So if you take a 20% marker, you're looking at a pretty significant increase over last year, 20 to 30%, I think it was, of a stolen base increase. That's what has been speculated.
Yeah, and that's there's also a good model over at Baseball Prospectus where they kind of tried to model what happened in the minor leagues with these rule changes, and they expected of like a 25% increase in stolen bases too. That's a ton of stolen bases. However, if you think about it, a guy with 4 steals 5. So it's not going to be that much on the player level. And even we started looking at who it would affect the most. And if you do go look at that Jason Collette thread on Twitter, there's some research on it where someone looked at types of players and who benefited the most. And it lined right up with what Stephen Vogt said, which is the top guys did not actually see that many more increases in stolen base attempts and weren't any more successful. But the guys who had a little bit of speed and weren't successful, didn't have great success rates, did take off more and were more successful. So it means the most in these like little small places where I think a guy who could steal 4 might actually steal 6. Which is a 50% increase, but the guy who steals 30 may not steal much more than 31 or 32. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I do think on a percentage level, we're going to see it mostly out of these handful of steals guys. We're going to see guys go from 8 to 10 and from 6 to 8. And that's great because that's my strategy in fantasy is always to load up on the guys who steal you 10 bags or whatever. And I'm hoping all those guys steal, 12 to 15 this year. And it makes my strategy just as viable as before. Yep. I went back and looked at 2012 real quick. The leader that year was Mike Trout with 49 steals. There was Everett Cabrera with 44. Last year, we didn't have anybody over 35, so we could have somebody over 40. And also we had like 28 guys with 20 steals in 2012. And last year, I think we had like 16. So there are going to be more guys with 20 steals. There probably going to be some difference at the top, but a lot of the difference will come with the guys who steal, 5 to 12 bags.
So there were kind of 2 questions I had. One was, I didn't see this in the data. One interesting part about the end of Collette's was essentially saying that he had an exact number, 25.2% improvement. It's essentially saying last year there were just about 3,300 stolen base attempts, and he's projecting 4,131 based off of what we're seeing early. is that the only thing I haven't seen is there any difference in the success rate of stolen bases? Because it's one thing if they're stealing more. I'm curious if the success rate is changing because we have less pickoff attempts and we have shorter base paths, that we can say like, okay, 25% maybe only equates to, 2 or 1 or 2 or something like that. But what if the success rate has gone up? And then all of a sudden you're also looking at maybe an extra 1 or 2. The percentage actually goes up because the success rate is better now with lower bases. That might be a little tiny quantifiable thing that might change, those middle line guys to steal just a couple more bases. And back to what you said, might get us back into a spot where 30 stolen base guys could become 40 this year. But I don't think I've seen anything like that.
Well, Bradley Libros did some work. He's Blibros, and he's on that thread, and he did some work where he did look at exactly that. And he looked at stolen base success rates before and after changes. And he basically found that everyone, the top guys became more successful. So they had a 78% success rate before and 84% after. Tom Tango thinks like 2 to 3% of that is just the base size. So that means that the throws over were a big part or more part of the extra success rate, the rules about throwing over and leadoffs and stuff like that. The low success baseline went from 65% to 75%. So a larger raw difference. That's big. Really big because the break even point for stealing bases is 69%. That's why the middle guys will steal more relative than before, because they're going to go from no go to go, right? It's all scienced up. Like they've got it all figured out. And so if they go from 65 to 75, the Major League Baseball average in stolen base success rate is 75%. So you just went from, no, you shouldn't go, man. You're 65%. You're costing us runs, to, oh, yeah, you can go now. So from going from no go to go means a lot means more. And so their stolen bases went up, I think, more than the high success rate guys.
I will tell you,
you should check it out.
I want to check that out. Everybody should go check that out. That it has the potential to be a game changer. And can everybody think of one player that keeps jumping to my mind that really might steal a lot of bases this year? We might talk about him in just a tiny bit, if you can think of what I'm talking about. You kind of already talked about this. The other question I was going to ask you, and then we're going to move on, was like, is any of this playing a role in changing anything about your fantasy takes for this year? I mean, you already said you kind of want those like middle line guys. You're looking for those 10 stolen base guys to stack those players. But when you talk about, caught stealing rates and you talk about the stolen base rates in general, I don't know, does it change anything whatsoever, or does it just more push your fantasy agenda for the year?
I think we should change our targets, because we're projecting a 25% increase in stolen bases, and so if you used to, target 80 stolen bases, and that used to be good enough for me. 80 is not leading the league in stolen bases in your league, in a 15-team league, but 80 is like being in the top 4, and the reason I did that was because I didn't want to spend so much on steals, and so I would just get enough to get to 80 and win home runs, win RBI, you know what I mean? Like win all that other stuff and get 4th in stolen bases. That was always my aim. But if that's my aim in the past, then, if 80 is the number I was looking for, then I should be looking for 100.
And that is going to change some potential.
If you'd like to get like 100 before, you should look for 125. Like, I think you should change your target for stolen bases if you're drafting in any league.
So there's not a player. You're saying the overall target of what you're chasing for the position.
Because we're gonna have a really hard time. As much as we just spent talking about modeling it and who's going to get the most out of it and the thinking we can do, they have to play it out. Yeah. And some people are gonna in that discussion, that fascinating discussion we had. You were talking about Corbin Carroll's raw speed versus Jordan Lawler's knowledge on the field, right? If you're talking about Jordan Lawler, maybe he's going to get those throws over and play cat and mouse and like really zoom in on that and steal a lot more. Whereas Corbin Carroll's more just of a burner, and he's not going to get those throws over, and maybe he'll just steal what he would have stolen anyway, whatever that number is. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to come down to like the actual player in each case, but we know it's going to go up 25%, right? So the one thing you do know, you don't know who's going to get them all, but you know that you need that there's going to be more, and so you have to get more. So I think that's the big takeaway.
Yeah, and Carroll specifically, it's interesting because it's just about the caught stealing rate, that improving just is a better factor for the fastest player in baseball to be able to steal more bases. All right, that's a fascinating discussion, and then maybe down the line here we'll have some more of some of those potential targets that you're going to be looking at as spring training kind of keeps evolving and we're seeing players go. We got a lot of news and notes here. Maybe one of the biggest one from a player perspective was Yordan Alvarez. Yordan Alvarez still not swinging a bat with a wrist injury, and that is concerning. I will tell you this, 2 drafts I'm doing, I told you I went Ricky Bobby in TGFBI that just started up. I'm if you're not first, you're last. I'm tired of messing around. I'm not playing it safe. I did the same thing in tout. I've put a lot of baskets into the Yordan Alvarez bucket here. I've drafted him in both spots. He fell to 15 here because people are generally worried. This isn't the same injury that the leg stuff really worries me about him. I'm a little bit less worried about this. They're just letting him rest. It's kind of similar to DeGrom, but that's not a good sell. But
it does highlight that there's that he's like an old young player. Like the knees aren't great.
The wrist.
He looks almost like he's older than he looks older. I feel like, and he's big, so I think there's a little bit of injury risk here that we maybe not be properly assessed.
So are you out? Like, he fell to 15 to me in TGFBI. Are you passing on Alvarez all day because of this? Because he hasn't been swinging in the first week of spring training?
Well, my projection said that Vlad Guerrero Jr. was $3 clear of Alvarez. That was my first round pick in TGFBI, but I had, in my queue, it was Vlad, Alvarez. It was easy choice for me there. But what if it was one later? What if I had the next pick and I'm choosing between Alvarez and like Betts?
I didn't even get that option. Alvarez, I would have taken Vlad. I would have easily taken Betts without question. Betts, I have at number 7 overall this year. So I'm all over Betts. I wasn't given any of those options. It was Alvarez or lower tiered players like
Burns or Devers.
Burns and Carroll, Burns and Cole and like Rafael Devers. That was what I was dealing with. And I felt I wanted to take the risk because yes, there's injury concerns. You got to take some shots, especially in the TGFBI, but I don't know if it's worth at this point being like, oh, I really want him to drop. If you want him to drop from 10 to 12 or something like that, but should he drop outside the top 20 because of this wrist issue?
I don't know. The flip side of it is that he is the best hitter in baseball.
Yeah. I mean, he was the darling in November. If I told you in November, you could get Alvarez at 15, you'd have been like, shut up. No,
yeah.
Because that's not going to happen. So that's one of the big ones. We're all kind of patiently waiting. No real early signs. They haven't even, this is the maybe bigger worrisome thing. They haven't given us any deadline. Like, hey, he's going to start swinging this week or early next week. He's going to get into a game. They're just very silent about it. And that is what is a little disconcerting. So beware if you've got some early drafts that are coming up that we are waiting for some news, but I have pulled the trigger because sometimes you will see this happen in spring training. There are small opportunities here and there that pop up for short periods of time where you get discounts on players.
Yeah.
I might get burned. I feel like this is an opportunity for me.
That's a good point. I remember I got Zach Wheeler
low
in the 4th or 5th last year because there was like the news cycle had been like, oh, he's hurt, he's behind, he won't make opening day. And then the day before my draft, he threw a bullpen and the velo was there and they were like, it's probably okay. He's going to make a start in 3 days or something, and I was like, bam, I want him.
I got him in tout last year, tout auction. I got him for like $13 because everyone was absolutely terrified about him.
There is a tendency to overreact. I don't know. This note I'm saying says hand. Is it a hand or a wrist? I would just wish we had more knowledge. And I think, in light of not having that knowledge, I would still take it.
Cubs had a couple injuries. Seiya Suzuki undergoing further testing. He did this on Sunday. I believe he was going to have an MRI today. I did not hear, as we're recording this on Monday, I didn't hear what the news was.
I
He
hate
was
obliques,
scratched.
man.
Yeah, he was scratched from a start. And then also Justin Steele was scratched with really, really horrible here. I hate to hear the word fatigue with any pitcher, but they said general arm fatigue. So are you more worried about the oblique with Suzuki than general arm fatigue with Justin Steele?
Both of those are not good. The obliques are bad because this is such a rotational sport that, and then the obliques are so tricky. I was talking to Greinke about when he had it, and he said, I just have to. It's just if it hurts or not, and I don't know if it hurts or not until I get up on the mound and try to throw, and then if it does hurt, I got to not throw for 2 weeks. And I just have to try it again, So coming back from an oblique sucks. I think I would have to. And then what you do want from Suzuki is some stolen bases. And that's not something you like. That requires obliques too. So like, I feel like I would knock Suzuki down a couple spots because of this news.
He also came to camp noticeably bigger. It looks like he added 10 to 15 pounds of muscle or something like that. I wonder if, it is blatantly to your eye that physical change might be playing a role. Like in the minor leagues, that's a pretty common thing. When these guys go through these big body changes, you'll see, an 18-year-old change his body to 20. Like it's not uncommon to see guys go through struggles where they're learning their body, that maybe Suzuki going through a completely different routine, adding that muscle played a little bit of a role in it. But oblique is very concerning for a guy that I'm targeting all over the board.
Yeah, so I really liked him before this. So I'm hoping for good news today. In the meantime, you just have to wait for more news,
Another piece of news, this is not injury based, and we're going to get to some stuff changes, was Alex Cora said that Masataka Yoshida will not be the leadoff hitter for the Boston Red Sox after everything that we were kind of sold on, that he will not, but he will actually be more in the middle of the lineup. And I don't know if that changes much. Does that change anything for you with Yoshida? Because he was, projected, most projection systems, is one of the best hitters in baseball this year. The leadoff spot had a lot of people going like, hey, stolen base potential if you're leading off and runs. But now if he's going to be hitting closer to 5 or 6, maybe RBIs are there, but that does seem like lesser of a stolen base spot. And I've never really believed he's going to be a big stolen base guy. And this almost all but confirmed. Not that guys at 5 or 6 don't steal bases, but I just feel like if they felt he's such an on-base threat and he could steal, you would want to put him at 1 or 2 in a lineup that's like, it's really not that impressive. But Yoshida has also, early on when he just signed, he had said he never let off before. He actually kind of wasn't, he openly said he wasn't comfortable with it, but he'd do whatever the team does. Anything change for you with Yoshida coming out of the leadoff spot?
No, I just think it's super, super weird that in his first 5 plate appearances in the big leagues, he's struck out 3 times. That just doesn't make any sense to me. He doesn't strike out.
It's spring.
So there's a little bit more risk here than the projection systems are letting on. They don't have him projected for that many stolen bases. So if you're using these projections in your auction calculator, you're not going to be buying him for stolen bases. And I would say that I watched him and he hit a real nice double and it looked like he had a good power swing. And he didn't get all of it and it went to the bottom of the wall. So I do think that I believe that he can hit 20 homers this year. So okay. 20 homers, 280 average, those things I believe in. The stolen bases were never that big a part of his game. Now you put him in the middle, you get more RBIs and runs. It's still pretty similar.
We also had I forgot one more injury. Rhys Hoskins apparently underwent offseason knee surgery in December. Don't like that. But the Phillies said he could be in action later this week. So kind of like the Miguel Vargas stuff. He had this little hairline fracture, but then he got back into game action. I think he went out and then he came back in. So I don't know if there's I'm not a big Rhys Hoskins guy kind of in general because of the position. You can get Rowdy Tellez later, who crushed. And I saw him Brewers camp the other day. So I don't know if you feel if that changes anything for you. I just don't like hearing a guy had knee surgery in December and it's like, yeah, it'll be in action later this week. Like, yeah, really? Are you sure? So are you a Rhys Hoskins guy? Does this do anything for you?
It's to repair a meniscus. It's a relatively minor knee surgery, as I understand it. And he's not a middle infielder. So do I think he can, hit 245 and hit 30 dongs this year? Yeah, I still think that.
Okay. Going to some performance based things here. There were some changes. This stuff based things. Manaea apparently fastball jumped from sitting around 89 to 90, and he openly said this surprised him. And I think he even was like, "Are the clocks good here?" That he was clocked in between 94 and 96 on the fastball. So this is right up your wheelhouse. What is Sean Manaea with that bigger of a fastball to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I think this is another guy in the string of pitchers that the Giants have signed that had not done weighted balls before they signed with the Giants. The Giants go send them to do weighted balls, and they reap the benefits. I mean, at least that's what happened with Alex Cobb and Alex Wood before. So going to Driveline really helped him. One thing that I want to say here is that his max. Let's look at his max. His max has been close to 96 in the past. Last year, his max in September was 95.7. Was he in the relief at that point? Anyway, even early in the season, it was 95. So what are you going to do when you come in for 2 innings? You're going to be closer to your max than usual. However, what do you do with weighted ball training? You allow yourself to sit closer to your max. That's actually part of the mechanism of weighted balls adding velo. So I do think he will have a better sitting velocity than he did last year. But I bet you he sits something like 92, 93 during the regular season. And, he's done that before. 2021, he was 91.6. So I'm saying like he'll sit this year 92.5 or something. So
this
maybe something we haven't. No, it is. I mean, a whole tick is nice. But there is also research that finds that a tick in that range is not as useful as other places. He's also going to a nice park. So I could see him getting back down to the years of 3.6, 3.8 ERA with a decent whip and a strikeout per inning. I don't think it makes him like an ace or anything, but that's a good
makes
pitcher.
Him valuable where he's going.
I knocked him up in my ranks a little bit. I knocked him up. I pushed him up in the ranks a little bit.
Manaea,
not having a baby with Sean. Yeah.
It's a beautiful baby draft that we got. How about this one? Nate Eovaldi, fastball apparently had decreased for 4 straight seasons prior to this year, but is up hitting 98 in his first spring start. I didn't have a gun when I saw him throw, but I had noted that it felt like it was popping out of Nate Eovaldi. So 4 straight year decrease, but you're shooting 98, kind of similar to what you said. You go in small innings, you're going to kind of hit your peaks. Is there any excitement? I think the Rangers rotation is super sneaky, even though they're quietly older arms, and Martin Perez is maybe a little less than exciting, but I really like Andrew Heaney this year. I think Nate Eovaldi is one of those players I kind of want to target late. Do you like that theoretical uptick in velocity, or do you think it's the same thing with Manaea where it's like, well, this is a 1 or 2 innings and he's really pumping it up?
If he enters the season with 98 as his max, it would be the worst max that he'd entered the season with since his rookie season.
Okay.
So it would also be much better than the max velo he was showing late last season. In September, his maximum fastball velo was 95.7. And October it was 96.4. So it would at least be bringing him back to the beginning of last season. And here's hoping that he can hit 100 before the season starts. But at 98, going back to the beginning of last season, I think is also important because he had a 3.3 ERA in the first half last year and a 4.9 ERA in the second half. My model loves Nathan Eovaldi. And if he's closer to the first half version, then he's going to be better than all his projections and be maybe closer to other models are saying he's going to have a 3.8 to 4 ERA and PPERA, which is nice because we always love to say the word PP in this household. PP ERA says Eovaldi is going to have a 3.39 ERA. And I think if he's hitting 98 right now, that's possible for him.
Okay, that's a good sign. A guy that got a lot of pub just like a week or so ago about big changes was Joe Ryan. And Joe Ryan, in his first spring start, kind of scrapped a few other pitches, and we saw a dose of this new split change and this new sweeper that he was throwing. He ended up giving up 2 runs, though, in 1 1/3 of an inning. So, we're trying out stuff. We're readjusting. Results weren't necessarily there. But Joe Ryan has been on a little bit of a balloon lately as he's rocketed up on some value. Are you buying into the Joe Ryan hype right now, especially after he's throwing? Like a lot of these guys will talk about like, hey, I'm going to start throwing this, but the game action is a little bit different, similar to like what I talked about with Bryce Miller, where the gyro is still a work in progress. But Joe Ryan just came right out the gates throwing some of the new stuff.
Yeah, I pushed him higher on the revelation that he's throwing a sweeper. His sweeper was much better, stuff plus in the second half. I think we talked about it on Rates and Barrels recently, but I pushed him back up to 45 now. He's right there with Luis Garcia and Jeffrey Springs and Jordan Montgomery. I think that's a group of interesting young arms in good parks with mid to high threes ERA projections. None of them is going to strike out 30% or really join the ace tier, I don't think. But the nice thing about Ryan, and this is actually probably different from any of those other guys that I just said, Ryan's fastball is the best of those 4 guys. And Ryan's fastball has always been his best pitch. So if he does have a split finger that works and the sweeper we kind of know works from late season stuff plus, he's probably has a little bit more upside than Jordan Montgomery, Luis Garcia, and Jeffrey Springs. Like those other guys are pretty well formed at this point.
With Joe Ryan, I was trying to pull this up here. His overall ADP, probably change I didn't do draft champions, is 143. Do you think 143 and 237 with Nate Eovaldi is too big of a gap?
Yeah, 100%. I have them 5 apart in the rankings. I'm a little aggressive on Eovaldi, I guess. I'm probably one of the high men on it. I see that 3.39 projected ERA. I do have a 145 innings total with him, but I have him in a tier there with Grayson Rodriguez and Alex Cobb and Freddie Peralta. Those are the 4 guys where you're taking on the injury, the not injury necessarily, but innings risk. You're taking on an innings risk there, but they could all perform really well. And if any of them throws 180 innings, they could be, in it for the Cy. I mean, I don't know about that's true for Alex Cobb, but Peralta, Rodriguez, and maybe even Eovaldi. If he throws to like a 3.2 ERA in 180 innings, like he could be in top 10 for the Cy.
I like and I don't like that you're pumping up Eovaldi because he's like my late draft guy. So I like that we're talking about him and the confirmations there, but he's probably going to move up just a little bit in there. There were a couple others. I want to move on to more of the performance stuff, but we also saw kind of a new approach from Nolan Gorman with the Cardinals, who I read this really interesting article about how, he was mashing early on, but pitchers adjusted and just started attacking him high in the zone, and he wasn't able to readjust. Coaches talked to him about that. He worked on, I think, with some tech stuff, and now he is starting to be able to spray balls all around, and he's been able to hit all fields, which is really big for him. And we also saw Nate Pearson, the ghost of Nate Pearson.
Well, just real quick on the Gorman thing, you can do a simple heat map over at Fangraphs, the heat map tab. I've just got contact rate on all his pitches. And he has 50% contact rates on the top part of the zone. And he's very obviously his heat map is he's a low and in hitter. And he likes inside and he likes low and inside. And so, if he does, when you develop that hole out over the top of the plate, they just pick at it and pick at it. And that's why you get a 16% whiff rate, 33% strikeout rate. If he can improve that strikeout rate at all, he becomes much more relevant for that team. And then also the other question is just how he fits defensively. I just don't know how that.
I mean, DA. I've continuously look at the Cardinals and just say there's a trade waiting to happen. I mean, maybe
it seems like Gorman is the guy they're going to trade. They're not trading Walker.
No, of course not. But like
you could trade Yepes and put Gordon in there.
I think Yepez and Carlson are potential players, and Nolan Gorman's still like 22 years old. So if they really still want to believe in that bat, especially that he took some of that
I bet
tutelage
you
that
he
they
goes
wanted
back
him
to
to
the
do,
minor leagues and they say, do this swing in the minor leagues for a half season and see where you are.
and then maybe he becomes the DH if they make a move here. Also, Nate Pearson showing off some good stuff. Multiple 100-mile-per-hour fastballs in there, almost registered at 101. I know that got some people excited. I still believe he's a reliever overall, but nice to see him throwing some high heat in there. You and I talked about this beforehand, and we only have so much more time. I did want to talk about a few of the performance things, but you want to talk about at bat leaders, because there were some really interesting spring at bat leaders early on. The Royals and Padres, Royals, Rangers, Padres, and Mariners might have a little bit of an uptick because they started the first 2 games, but there were a couple guys that jumped out as far as at bat leaders go. So what do you want to hit on that?
Yeah, I just thought I just wanted to point out that it's just at bats alone are an interesting indicator in the spring because the team is giving them a real look and they're making it a priority to put them into the roster, every day,
Especially early.
Yeah, and so I think it's instructive to see like Mark Vientos tied for the lead in plate appearances, Jarred Kelenic right there with in the second group. Jackson Merrill, Pete Crow Armstrong. Those are the kind of young guys that are getting the chances. Nolan Jones leads the Rockies in at bats. So those are all kind of names I'm looking for. And if you're looking for that Julio Rodriguez narrative in terms of of making the team out of spring training, I think one thing you'll want to do is note that he ended up playing a lot last spring, and in terms of leading how he did in terms of his team, he led the Mariners in plate appearances in spring training, right? So if you want somebody to kind of hit the ground running and make the team and be this one of these like Julio Rodriguez type prospects, you want them on this AB leaderboard. I don't see Walker here yet. It's early going. I'm not saying that Jordan Walker is not going to do this, but that these guys are on here is interesting to me. Then you have a lot of the guys who are battling for a spot. David Dahl is up there. So I think there's a possibility. We were talking about Tatis. There's a role there. So there are some. Brandon Dixon is up there in plate appearances. Those are the guys fighting for the last 2 spots on the Padres roster.
What's also interesting is the WBC comes into play here because there's a lot of players are going to be leaving. Me and Eno spent a decent amount of time before the podcast talking about the Padres in general because you've got Tatis that's out for a month, which is an interesting wrinkle. Plus you've got them losing half their team to the WBC. They're going out there. So they have probably the biggest non-roster invitee that I've seen amount of players. And David Dahl was like number 2 as far as at bats go, which might give him a little leg up as a possibility for it. But I wanted to turn it back to Kelenic, which I think is really interesting because even though he has major league time, Kelenic might be in a Julio Rodriguez situation this year. I would guess that Jarred Kelenic will lead the Padres in at-bats.
The Mariners.
The Mariners this spring training for a couple of reasons. A, they're suffering injuries. Taylor Trammell is missing time. B, you've got Teoscar Hernandez and Julio Rodriguez leaving, and this is the time. We also we got the
leaving for the WBC, yeah.
WBC. We've got the whole like he let new people into his camp and sticky notes. He's kind of had a different approach. I saw him having an all fields approach in a couple BPs, and he had a phenomenal start to spring training. That first game or second game, 2 for 3, had 2 home runs. The problem is like, how are you going to weigh this? Because there's obviously the critical point. Friend Rob Silver put out a tweet where he's got like, a sub 20% K rate and 8 homers in spring training, and it's over 30 in the majors. And he
led the Mariners. He tied with Julio Rodriguez for the plate appearances last year. And he had a 265 average, 559 slugging, 3 homers, and only 9 strikeouts and 34 ABs, 37 ABs. So like, he's done this before.
Do you buy it? Do you buy it?
I guess I'm interested because they need him. We were talking about this in the preview section over at the 3-0 show. He's probably one of the most pivotal players in his division in terms of a single player being so meaningful for his team, because this team does not, it has Julio Rodriguez, yes. And I like Cal Raleigh a little bit, and Teoscar Hernandez is still a good hitter, but it doesn't really have star hitters on the same levels. You know, they have one star hitter, and so they need the rest of the lineup to be a no holes lineup. And they have a big hole right now in left field. And if Kelenic can step forward, then you've got a lineup that, you know, can do you damage from different spots in the lineup. It's longer. It means it's really meaningful because they have a really good pitching staff. So Kelenic is I think super pivotal for that team. So yeah, he's definitely going to lead in plate appearances for the Mariners. I just don't know how much to take away. The one thing I would say is usually strikeout rate in a small sample is somewhat meaningful. And there is signal in spring training information. We know this from Dan Rosenheck's research about it, that you know, your spring training OPS will actually affect your projection. Like it does actually improve your projection. So it is somewhat meaningful. It is a month of play. Like if you saw Jarred Kelenic, you know, go off in April next year, you would think that was meaningful. You know, it would be if it was a whole month. So I will say this: I would love to see his strikeout rate and power numbers be good in this month. And if they were, it would affect my appraisal of him a little bit.
Only last thing I'd point out was in his very first at bat in spring training, Corbin Carroll, he led off for the Diamondbacks. He hit a single and immediately stole second base.
Stole
it by a mile, baby. And of course I had to make a comment. And of course I had to get the sarcastic trolley stuff about my love for Corbin Carroll. But I just want to point out that Corbin Carroll's going to steal 30 plus bases this year. And he not only led off for that team, but he already looks good. And he was running. He was running, you know. And you even said on this show, I want people to remember that, you know, you talk about volatility with rookies. There's a floor there. There's a floor there with this guy that seems like no others, and it's already jumping up. Underdog best ball drafts, he's jumped up from 80s to the 50s right now.
Oh, so, no. This
Corbin Carroll's on a rocket,
about.
Though,
I liked him at 80, but 50 might be pushing it, dude.
It's a little bit pushing it. So and maybe one of the guys that we can be encouraged about for spring training. Lots of other fun stuff to talk about. We'll have more notes or plenty of other interesting performance, even things we didn't get to. Want to talk about Reed Detmers, but we can do it on another episode. Tomorrow, we're going to actually talk about more pitchers because Eno and I on the Project Prospect, we're going to talk about the pitchers that you want to target, prospects to target pitchers for redraft. So maybe a little bit of Brandon Pfaadt, who's my favorite. We could talk about Grayson Rodriguez and quite a bit more. So make sure you tune into that Dynasty Prospect based episode. Make sure you go to athletic.com/rates and barrels. Subscribe today. Get access to the Pitching Plus projections, the draft kit, my Dynasty ranks. $2 a month to get you set up. It's a beautiful thing. And make sure you follow Eno on Twitter at Enosaurus. You can follow me at IsItTheWelsh. That is all that we have for you, friends. Until next time, it's Rates and Barrels, and we will have fun with you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening.